Hey everybody, just wanted to talk to you for a second about one of the most common questions that we get asked in functional medicine regarding hormones is, do hormones cause cancer? This has been a myth that has been gone around for a long time, for the last couple of decades. And really where it started was in 2002 when the Women's Health Initiative study came out. This came out, suddenly made a big splash in the headlines, and the headline was, hormones cause cancer. So what happened was we, in traditional medicine, we just put the brakes on hormones, and we just felt like we had to take all women off their hormones. We said, sorry, it's too risky, we don't want you to get cancer. And that created a lot of problems, as you might imagine. The Women's Health Initiative study has been reanalyzed for years now since it first came out. And what happened was when it was first released, it showed supposedly that there was a 25% increased risk of breast cancer for the women who are on hormones, both estrogen alone and the estrogen-progestin combination. A lot of us thought, this doesn't make sense. Women in their 20s and 30s have high estrogen. If estrogen caused breast cancer, why aren't we seeing it until women are in their 50s, 60s, 70s? But we kind of went along with what we were told, and so we stopped women's hormones for the most part. In the subsequent years after Women's Health Initiative came out, there was a lot of attention paid to this data and a lot of reanalysis. And what happened over the next several years is that when they really reanalyzed the data, they realized that that supposed 25% increase was not statistically significant. So they really shouldn't have reported those results. So really there was no increased risk of breast cancer. And interestingly, when you drilled down to the estrogen-only group, there was less breast cancer. So there's some data that estrogen may lower your risk of breast cancer, not increase it. And that was actually published there were several reports that came out that were published in the journals, but of course those did not make the headline on USA Today or NBC News or anything like that. So most people missed that, and even some doctors weren't aware when those corrections came out. There's also a really interesting study done a little bit more recently on BRCA gene carriers. The BRCA gene is one that does increase your risk for certain cancers, including breast cancer. So these women are at higher risk. But they did a study on women who were BRCA gene carriers, and they put some of them on hormones and some they did not. Interestingly, the ones, of course, that were on hormones had all the good benefits we would expect, less dementia, better bone health. But there was no difference whatsoever in the risk of breast cancer. So high-risk women put on estrogen had no increased risk of breast cancer. So you would think if it was going to happen, we would at least see it in that group of women, but we didn't. So since that time, we've done more research and looking at this, and it is interesting that there's more and more data pouring in showing that hormones, in particular estrogen, but also progesterone and testosterone, do have some data that they lower your risk for breast cancer. So this is really good news. 10 to 20 years ago, we were very cautious. A lot of physicians wouldn't treat women who were breast cancer survivors, but that tide really has turned. And so typically now, a lot of us will have this discussion with women who are breast cancer survivors and say, okay, this is in the past, you know, everything is stable and settled, and it's a risk-benefit discussion, and certainly it's dependent on the woman's comfort level with this. But the data is really continuing to come in that hormones not only do not increase your risk for breast cancer, but they probably lower your risk, and the recent data shows that even breast cancer survivors have no increased risk of recurrence going on estrogen. So this is really, really good news. One other note too on the whole concept of estrogen receptor positive breast cancer versus the other version is estrogen receptor negative breast cancer. ER positive breast cancers typically respond better to therapies and have better outcomes than ER negative. So if you've had an ER positive breast cancer in the past, the concern is, well, if I go on estrogen, is it going to stimulate those receptors on any leftover cancer cells I might have? And you would think that maybe that makes sense. But the way that a lot of us are viewing those types of cancer histories is that if you're an ER positive breast cancer survivor, those cells, those cancer cells that you had, were actually a little bit more like your natural, normal breast cells, versus an ER negative cell has changed so much and become much more abnormal that it's lost its receptors, because breast cells have estrogen receptors. So just because you're a breast cancer survivor and it was ER positive does not necessarily mean that you can't ever go on estrogen. So this is an ever-evolving field, but it's really an exciting time to be in functional medicine because this is definitely something that a lot of us are doing, and we're seeing great outcomes. So feel free to talk to your provider if you're a breast cancer survivor, or if you just are concerned, if you think you're at higher risk, talk to your doctor and we'll be happy to explain to you the pros and cons.